Hello and welcome to the Devils in the Details. With the growing amounts of misinformation that is being spread across the internet at a perpetually increasing rate, I have decided to help the people of Earth in determining what is and isn't fake news. This channel will be dedicated to debunking myths, bad arguments, and examining fake news in general, by using the scientific method and peer-reviewed research. My hope is to encourage people to use critical thinking again, and to better understand the world around us and how to identify the fake news that is plaguing society. Because fake news can only exist in a society absent of critical thinkers. But before I get into that, I want to begin by talking about how we determine what is and is not true, as well as lay down the basics of the scientific method and why peer-reviewed can be trusted. So, let's start with the basics and work our way up. The first thing I would like to cover is the burden of proof. This seems to be a tricky subject, and some people don't understand this simple concept and will often leave it up to someone else to prove a negative. There are many different circumstances to which the burden of proof can be applied. One such circumstance is the rule of law. Cornell Law School defines it as the standard that a party seeking to prove a fact in court must satisfy to have that fact legally established. Basically, if you wish to state something as a fact, you must have the evidence to back up your claims. A common fallacy is shifting the burden of proof. This is most common among creationists who believe it is up to atheists to disprove their very specific God, and not on them to prove the claims. It would be as though a criminal prosecution's only argument is to ask the defense to prove their client didn't do it. It is the job to prove the defendant guilty, and they do that with evidence and not making someone else prove a negative. Let's take a look at an example. Former Fox News host Bill O'Reilly was notorious for deploying this type of fallacy.
Something's either got to be true or not.
I can't prove to you that Jesus is God. So that truth is mine and mine alone. But you can't prove to me that Jesus is not. So you have to stay in your little belief system.
You can't prove that Zeus is not. You can't prove that Apollo is not. Or
I saw Apollo, man.
This video is the perfect demonstration of shifting the burden of proof. O'Reilly basically said, what I believe is true until you can disprove it's not. The point is that someone who makes a positive claim carries the burden of proof, and it is on them to provide that evidence. Before we move on, let's take a moment to see if you can identify this fallacy in action. Watch this video and see if you can spot the shifting burden of proof.
It's not true because there's no evidence of it. It's just stuff being talked about on the internet, right?
There hasn't been any non-evidence yet.
Another issue is making claims that are not backed by evidence. For instance, if you stated that
this was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period.
Right. I don't mean to pick on conservatives, but they just make it so damn easy. If this is the only proof that has been offered to this claim, then Mr. Spicer has not met the burden of proof necessary to make these claims. It may be true that it was the biggest crowd, but there has been no proof brought forth to demonstrate that it was. This is an important difference to establish. Just because something has not been demonstrated to be true does not mean that it isn't. It may just mean that more research is needed. Let's look at this from court perspective again. A jury can find a defendant not guilty, but that does not mean they were found innocent or even guilty for that matter. It just means that at that time the prosecution has not met its burden of proof. Moving on, one of the greatest tools at humanity's disposal is the scientific method. The first step in the process is to make an observation. Let's say your car won't start. Then logically the next step is to ask why. Why doesn't my car start? Then begin gathering evidence to help find the answer to your questions. Maybe your battery is dead because you left your lights on. This is called a hypothesis. Next, you make a prediction to what would happen if the hypothesis is true, such as if the battery is dead, I can get a jump start and it will fix the problem. Then this is tested by experimentation. In this case, you jump start the car. If it starts, then you can postulate that your hypothesis is correct. The last step is to reflect on your results, or publish them, and it's at this point when the peer review process begins. Meaning others will test your research and experimentation to attempt to replicate your results. Obviously, this is a very basic explanation of a very sophisticated process, and I am only using it to demonstrate the basics of the scientific method in an easy to understand format. The peer review process gets more detail-oriented, so I will use a real-life example. To help explain this process, let's take a look at Einstein's theory of relativity. One of the fundamentals of this theory is that the gravity of the sun can warp light. He published his research and maths in 1915. It was tested by Sir Arthur Eddington in 1919. During a lunar eclipse, Eddington photographed the background stars that would be visible during the eclipse. Knowing where the stars would be, Eddington kept his camera in the exact same location to photograph the stars during the eclipse. If Einstein's theory was correct, the stars would have appeared to change locations due to the gravity from the sun. When the photos were developed, it was clear what happened. The sun's gravity bent the light from the stars to appear as though they changed positions. Einstein was correct and his theories were vindicated by a British astrophysicist. His theories still stand today as they have withstood many peer reviews and attempts to replace his theories. This also means that just because a theory is accepted, it is only accepted as the best explanation for a specific observation. If you wish to replace a theory, it must be done with a better one. Asserting that the Bible says otherwise is not a theory, never mind a better one. It is simply the bemoanings of a cult trying desperately to stay relevant. Now you might be saying, can't scientists fake the research just for the fame and money? But why would they? These experiments can be reproduced by anyone with a camera. And if it is proven that the information has been faked, then that scientist loses all his credibility. And credibility is what makes scientists marketable. Why would someone go through all that school and debt incurred only to risk throwing it all away faking research that can be proven false? For instance, let's look at British surgeon Andrew Wakefield. In 1997 he published a study that claimed vaccines cause autism. This article was published by The Lancet, an actual respected journal. His paper was taken into consideration by other research agencies and no link was found between vaccinations and autism. After a failed lawsuit attempt by Wakefield, it was discovered that his paper had errors in its documentation of certain cases and Wakefield was exposed as a fraud and his paper was retracted. Now I know some amongst us may believe that Wakefield was right and that he was only guilty of going against the scientific status quo. While this is a subject worth considering, I will not get into it now because this is a subject I wish to cover on a later date. People that try and claim that peer-reviewed is corrupted are usually doing so because they are on the losing end of an argument, and their only weapon is to discredit what disproves them. Much like Einstein and Eddington, peer review happens across borders. Nothing would have made Eddington happier than to disprove Einstein. For this conspiracy to work, it would require the vast majority of scientists across the globe and across all disciplines. It is far more likely the person is incorrect than a conspiracy at this scale. Furthermore, respected scientific journals rely on subscriptions to make money, and the agencies that pay for these subscriptions, they rely solely on the reliability of the information within the journals to stay afloat. Selling faked information to research agencies will only ensure they don't come back when the information they paid for didn't work. You wouldn't buy a car from a dealership if the first one you bought didn't run. These are just some of the reasons why peer-reviewed is the best tool humans have for discovering the truth. After all, the fruits of this process are all around you: the medicine that keeps you healthy, the satellites you watch television, even listening to the radio, GPS, the screen you're watching this on, the internet you're stealing to stream this video, are all products of peer-reviewed research. Pretty good for something that's all faked. Now that we have laid down some of the groundwork, I can move on to other subjects. I know I went over much, so let's save that for another time. I want to thank you for watching and please like and subscribe. Please join me next time when I take a closer look at a popular creationist argument. Until then, hail Sagan.